Good morning, everybody. My name is Carol George, and I am an occupational therapist for the Charlotte Mecklenburg School System. Today, I will be presenting on the topic embedding sensory strategies into the classroom setting. Our learning objectives for this presentation are to be able to define sensory processing, identify how deficits in sensory processing can impact a student at school, be able to state sensory tools that will support students that have sensory processing issues, discuss how to create a calming retreat in the classroom, and be able to identify some ways to create a calming environment for students upon their arrival to school. To get started, we need to know that we are all sensory beings and receive sensory information all day long from our various senses. Think about your drive to work today and how much information you took in. Were you listening to the radio? Did you see people, cars, nature, animals? Was your grasp on the steering wheel light, or were you gripping it tightly because of traffic? Was your seat hot or cold, smooth or rough? And did you have coffee or tea with you in the car? How was the smell of that? We all have sensory needs, things we seek out to help us regulate, or things we tend to avoid. It is how we process that sensory information we are receiving every day that impacts how we function in life. Some children have difficulty coping with the sensory information they receive in their daily lives. Some children will seek sensory information and others will avoid it. This coping can change for a child depending upon their environment, the time of day, or how they feel. Plus, the intensity and characteristics of their behaviors can vary. Each child is unique in how they process information from their senses, with one or possibly more senses being impacted. These children who have difficulty with processing information from the senses, we need to see what they see. We need to feel what they feel. And we need to hear what they hear. If we did, we might see the world differently. So imagine if you are one of these children, where the humming of the lights in the room sound louder than the teacher's voice. Or every time someone touches you, it feels like sandpaper on your skin. Or every sound you hear can feel like a dentist drill going through your ears. Or the lights are so bright in the classroom you have to squint because you get a headache. Imagine if you couldn't focus your eyes on someone because everything and everybody in the room catches your eyes. Or you could only sit for 15 minutes before you feel like you want to crawl out of your skin. What about your socks felt like there was an alligator biting your feet? Or when you walked into a classroom where the announcements were on, you felt like there were multiple movies being played all at once. While we are talking about sensory, I would like to talk about stimming briefly. I am sure we have all seen students that stim, or what is called self-stimulatory behavior. Stimming is a repetitive body movement that is done to stimulate the senses. So it may be vocal, physical, or visual. Some types of stimming behaviors are hair twirling, hand flapping or finger flicking, humming, spinning, rocking, jumping, and even repeating phrases. Stimming is commonly seen in students with autism and students that have sensory processing issues. Stimming behavior serves a purpose. So these students that stim usually are either overwhelmed by sensations, new information, or their own thoughts. Stimming is often used as a way for students to calm and relax, regulate their emotions, reduce sensory overload, or reduce pain. It can also be seen if a student is trying to express their emotions, such as, I'm tired, I'm bored, I'm happy or excited, I'm nervous, or I need help to focus. When you see stimming behaviors, these behaviors do not necessarily need to be addressed unless they are dangerous, harmful, self-injurious, or prevents the student or others from learning. Some of these behaviors might be headbanging, pulling the hair out, picking skin until it bleeds, or biting. Extreme stimming signifies that a child is suffering and their needs are not being met. It is important to know that if you try to stop a behavior, another behavior will usually occur. We said that some students experience sensory information differently. Students who are hypersensitive to sensory input may experience sensory overload. Sensory overload is when your senses take in more information than your brain is able to process. And some of the behaviors you might see are meltdowns may occur. The student may have difficulty focusing, so they can't complete their task. Self-injurious behaviors may occur. Stimming may increase, as well as the activity level, as well as sensitivity. You might see elopement, where the children will begin to scream, yell, cry, and they might avoid certain places. When a brain is so overwhelmed by sensory input, it enters into a fight, flight, or freeze mode in response to what feels like a crisis. When the child is in a fight mode, this is when you see aggressive behaviors or screaming or yelling. In the flight mode, you might see the child trying to elope, hide, or withdraw. In the freeze mode, children usually refuse to answer, act, move. They almost appear numb. Sensory overload can feel like you're in a glass case or inside a pinball machine and you can't get out. It could be like fireworks going off in your mind. It could be like you're on a merry-go-round where all the lights and sounds are going so quickly that you cannot make sense of it. Or sensory overload can feel like a traffic jam where all the sensory information is coming in, but you don't know what to do with it. Sensory overload can vary daily because of lack of sleep, emotional stress, hunger, thirst, or even when a child does not feel good. So the bottom line is getting to know your students. Look at their behaviors. Are they sensory seekers or avoiders? Are they on sensory overload? Are they bored, happy? Figure out their needs and their triggers. What happens before and after the behaviors? Each behavior serves a purpose. It is a feeling where a student is trying to identify a need. All these children want us to do is to understand their world, because that is the way we are going to be able to provide the tools that help them be successful at school. So before I talk about sensory supports, and before you implement any type of sensory tool, I think it is important to get a better understanding of what sensory processing is and how difficulties in this area can impact learning and behavior. Sensory processing is the ability to take in information from your senses, from what you see, hear, feel, touch, interpret it, make sense of it, and then respond appropriately to it. For most people, this is automatic. So picture yourself at the lake, standing on a dock, about to get into a canoe. You put a foot in the canoe and it starts to rock. At the same time, a loud dog starts to bark and the sky gets dark from a stormy cloud and it starts to rain. Automatically, you're able to adjust your body to keep balanced and to sit down in the middle of the seat. This is sensory integration. There are 8 sensory systems. Most of us are familiar with 5 of them: the visual, what you see; the auditory, what you hear; olfactory, what you smell; gustatory, what you taste; tactile, what you feel. But there is also the proprioceptive system, which is the sense that has to do with our muscles and joints. There is also the vestibular system, which deals with movement and balance. And then there is the interoceptive system, which is one of the newer systems, which gives us the ability to feel what is happening inside of our body. For example, you're able to tell when you are hungry because your stomach growls or you get that empty feeling in your stomach. That is the interoceptive system. I like this pyramid of learning diagram, which was developed by an occupational therapist. It is a helpful visual for understanding why the sensory systems are so important for children and their development. It proposes that learning is incremental. This illustration outlines the foundational skills at the bottom of the pyramid and the skills that are supported by the foundational skills on the tiers above. The foundation of the pyramid is a child's central nervous system, and you can see how closely linked the sensory systems are to the central nervous system, to that foundational level. If the lower levels of the pyramid for learning are not solid or are not working well, the child will have difficulty with the tiers above. They may have trouble with speech, behavior, attention, and even academic learning. I want you to keep these thoughts and points in mind when I begin to talk about the sensory supports. Every behavior has a purpose. It is important to be proactive and not reactive. Put sensory supports in place to begin with. It may take you a little bit of time, but it will help you in the long run. Remember that sensory supports are not one size fits all. Every child is unique. Students need to be taught how to use sensory tools. They shouldn't automatically know how to use them, and they should not have to earn sensory tools. Be consistent and persistent with sensory tools. Don't expect magic overnight. Don't expect it to happen even in a week. Give the tools a chance to see if it makes a difference, but also continue to monitor the effectiveness of them. Provide choices for sensory input opportunities. Give the student a sense of control. And know as students mature, their needs change and their sensory preferences may change also. It is important to know that some sensory supports may need to be teacher-led to begin with. But hopefully, eventually, the students will learn how to self-advocate for the sensory supports. Include sensory breaks as part of your daily schedule and create a sensory retreat. One of the most important things to do, because behaviors can be very challenging, is to stay calm, be patient, use visuals, and use only a few words when communicating. Sensory tools might need to be used throughout the school, not just in the major classroom, but think about recess, cafeteria, or electives or specials. And do not use recess as a punishment. Children need that sensory input. A sensory support is any tool or strategy that increases or decreases sensory input to help a student with self-regulation, focus, alertness, and/or participation, and ultimately assist those students in achieving those higher level skills on the pyramid. By creating a sensory-friendly classroom and providing sensory supports, a space is being created where children feel safe, comfortable, and are able to learn. and you are creating that just right state of learning for students. Creating an environment with the right sensory tools can be an overwhelming task, as well as a very time-consuming task for teachers. So it is important to keep in mind that these supports should be proactive, easy to implement, as well as provide minimal classroom disruption. So how does one get started? When looking at all the classroom sensory supports, it is important to consider all the senses, as students can seek, avoid, or be overloaded by any one or more of the senses. Also, besides the sensory environment, it is important to consider the temperature and layout of the classroom. How a classroom is arranged accounts for 16% of the impact on a student's learning. The colors of the walls, the type of furniture, the amount or type of lighting, what is on the classroom walls, and the room arrangement all influence how students learn. The visual sense is what we take in with our eyes. The visual sensory